Oliver Cromwell, who defeated the Scots at Dunbar, incorporated Scotland into his protectorate, and transported the Scots as slaves to the colonies. Now, there's an answer to the West Lothian question.
Union. A joining. A coupling. A partnership. This union. Aye. Who was it came together in this union 3 centuries ago? We're taught to think, dear God, the whole world's taught to think, it was 2 different kinds of England. One, civilized, progressive. The other, primitive, backward. A quaint, savage variety out of the common British mould. But there is no common British mould. Adopted by an English queen, Elizabeth I, the words Britain and British have never meant more or less than England and English. Great Britain? Just England and its empire. Remember British India? How they tried to make it another England. But there never was. How could there be an English India? Or an English Wales, an English Ireland, or an English Scotland? Now you see the trick laid bare. Call it what you will. Colonization is the erasure of a nation, a people, culture, history, language, identity, by the self-proclaimed superiority of a plundering foreign power. Until a lie becomes reality, a people absorbed into the identity of the foreigner, and no other identity remains. And so I ask again, just who was joined by treaty 3 centuries ago? Was it not 2 sovereign nations as unalike as 1,000 years of enmity should tell you? An England and a Scotland, as contrary in character and ambition as ice and fire. Their enmity born not of a mutual desire for conquest, but from opposing natures. the nature of a Nordic people that would form the English state, the nature of the conqueror that could not rest until it owned the whole world, and did not rest until the English Empire straddled a quarter of the globe, and the nature of the Celts, who became the Scots, whose stubbornness revolts still against such subjugation. In truth, the history of our two nations can be told in this: an empire builder's fierce determination to conquer and control, and the fiercer determination of the Scots to resist. Among the nations of these isles, only Scotland was not seized and permanently held by force of arms. And would that Wales and Ireland had been as fortunate, for what a tale of blood and grief might then have been avoided. It is told in the earliest records, an 8th century Northumbrian chronicler describing the Northerners as bestial, and of savage mind, because, he says, they despised subjection to the Saxons. It is told through the centuries by army after English army crossing the border under orders of an English king to leave no creature of the Scots alive, of either sex or any age, only because they refused to submit.
If you care to look to see the bloody threads of that history spooling across the years, from the birth of Scotland to the Battle of Glasgow Square, you'd see a thing that the world has been told to unsee. You'd see the lie in that long-told colonial fairy tale that this so-called union, this voluntary merger, joined two kinds of England together at last. You see the first High King of Scotland, Kenneth MacAlpine, winning his long war against the Picts, who were not inclined to bow to any other rule, and uniting a nation against those English armies. You see the forging of the crown of Scotland, from the fires that claimed so many towns and villages, so many Scottish lives, man, woman and child, young and old. A crown fashioned by the common cause of resistance and survival against a brutal and relentless enemy. A crown that never made of one man or one woman sovereign overlord, but a crown for any king or queen of Scots to represent, to defend, in a cause for one united sovereign people, a crown that endured and endures to this day. You'd see the twice won freedom of Scotland twice snatched from fate for, say, an Ireland or Wales by the king they call the Bruce. For by the oath of fealty, sworn by Scots kings and nobles to English kings and by English law, Longshanks claimed sovereignty over Scotland, a claim enforced with a brutality that lives on in the records of infamy. But Bruce saw what Wallace saw before him. The English law and custom did not hold sway with the whole of Scotland, not even half of Scotland, not even a quarter of the land. How could they? How could a foreign feudal ritual compel Scots to submit to when it was a custom of a mere outpost, a royal court, alien to the Scots? And so, in 1309, with the declaration of the clergy and the people, they testified to the supremacy of the common folk, the people, appointing Bruce king by their knowledge, by their consent and authority. And in 1320 came the declaration of Arbroath, reaffirming sovereignty of the Scottish people against the feudal tyrant of English kings. And so the law of Scotland was restored. The common good became, again, the core and purpose of government, in place of greed, self-interest and feudal privilege. The sovereignty of the people became a fact of law. Across the centuries, you'll see the rights and interests of the people, the nation defended, promoted and protected from the cruelty and injustice. Where then lay the centre of Scottish power? With the sovereign, naturally, the people of Scotland. Where is the centre today? The people's sovereignty, the right to challenge any laws or policies of government, the common funds securing justice, food and shelter. Where are the measures against tax breaks for the rich or private contracts for the friends of government? To protect the independence of the judiciary or to prevent the predatory abuse of the law? All have been swallowed by this union. History never says farewell, only see you later. So Scotland endures today a self-proclaimed overlord and the claim of English rule by right of English law. What of this union? Then this partnership by consent. By what consent? Who consented? And to what did they consent? Did peace and friendship towards Scotland suddenly flower in the heart of the British Empire State? No. No. For the Union Pact was made with an army at the Scottish borders and a fleet on the force. Then they pointed to the men who signed their treaty out of fear or because they had been bought and said, Scotland consented. Scotland agreed. Scotland demanded a union. Meanwhile, in the length and breadth of this land, the people rose up in such numbers and with such passion that in the end, the voluntary union was enforced by military occupation.
The Pact. That treaty, that voluntary agreement, was shown for what it was before the ink was dry. A fiction, a wordy legal fig leaf to hide the annexation of a proud people by its covetous, unscrupulous neighbour. When English treason law in 1708 replaced the power of Scotland's crown with England's, 900 years of popular sovereignty sank beneath a foreign feudal monarchy. The English crown and all its rights and privileges now apply to Scotland, as if no impediment, no limit to that treaty had ever existed. No oath had ever bound a queen to defend the Scottish crown. They took away our trades and conscripted our young men for their armies and their navy. And when we rose up with freedom for Scotland on our swords, they called it a religious rising, not the revolt it was against the tyranny of a foreign power. They crushed it, not on the battlefield alone, but on the length and breadth of our land. Men, women, and bairns slaughtered in reprisal. Whether or not they'd taken part. And in the years that followed, every Scottish town and hamlet saw an English garrison, suffered English military justice in place of their own courts, their own laws, under English supervisors recruited from an army that had slaughtered their kith and their kin. And from Stirling to the Isles, Scots were forbidden to speak their native tongue, forbidden to wear the tartan, or to gather together, to dance or mourn, to play the pipes, or to follow their own laws. Such was the civilising of the Highlands. Such was this union. The history books will tell you how they civilised the Highlands, how they came to build schools and churches and give just laws and occupations to a backward people. We will tell you, we had schools, great schools, famous throughout Europe and in 1400s, back when only English nobility could read or write. Every child in Scotland learned their letters and their numbers, while the boys in the borough, working class lads, learned Latin and Greek, music and philosophy, mathematics and even Hebrew at free grammar schools paid for by the common good. Aye, but they built our schools. Every town had churches until they were burned by Cromwell and rebuilt, and burned by the English and rebuilt again. But they built our churches. And every town and hamlet had its trades, good enough, prosperous enough to pay for schools and churches and more. Enough for a thriving populace in what is now a barren wilderness. But they gave us our trades and occupations. They buried our laws and constitution, just as they buried the terms and conditions of the treaty. Not one law student in England, Scotland or Wales knows of the existence, far less the beauty and justice of the Scottish Constitution. Not one. They outlawed and ridiculed our languages and culture, making us a curiosity of bagpipes, heather and tartan to the watching world. And then, they taught us to despise our mother tongue. They buried and rewrote our past to paint us as savages. They taught us to romanticise a wild, barbaric past that never existed, then taught us to scoff and cringe at that past. The tomb tabards, the Scottish agents and profiteers of the English Empire, which they call proof that Scotland collaborated. Scotland profited from their rule and their empire, while slowly, systematically, erasing from history the famines, the dire poverty of the people, the forced immigration of 4 million Scots to foreign lands because they had no other way to survive, while the empire thrived and England grew rich. They took our ports, our trades, and our industries. They took our oil and gas by right of an English crown that was never an English crown's to claim. They told us that we could gain our freedom if Scotland sent enough MPs to Westminster who stood for independence. And then they changed the rules. They took our powers of the Scottish Court of Session and transferred them to their Supreme Court. They granted Northern Ireland trading rights in Europe, Greater England and the UK in violation of the treaty. They tell us that we're in a voluntary union, which we may not vote to leave. And such is this union. A lie, built on a lie, built on the lie, built on the violence of a conqueror, whose shame at his own nature is such that he must make patriotic hogwash a glory of lies to cover it, even from himself. And all our politicians seek is an honourable exit, a negotiated divorce from a marriage that never was, a union in name only, a name for an annexation, another name for a lawless, ruthless, feudal, rogue state that has become the pariah of the world, the breaker of treaties, the oppressor of its people.
And those who sneer that ours is the blood and soil nationalism of Hitler add bitter insult to this bitterest truth, that if we speak of blood, it is of Scots blood spilled, not triumphant, spilled for foreign power and foreign profit. And if we speak of soil, it is of the soil we call home, Ducas, beloved, and they call asset and property portfolio. Such is our nationalism. And then they'll say that all this means we hate the English. No. No. We do not hate the ordinary folk of England, who, God knows, have fared little better under the yoke of feudal class-based privilege than the other peoples of these isles. but we hate what England stands for, as it is not only natural but necessary to hate whatever or whomever so despises you that it will use its every power to wipe you out entirely. The determination to turn us, like every English colony, into an English Scotland is what we hate, must hate, until the day that it repents of that abhorrent ambition. But on the day it does repent, the day we Scots take back all it has pretended its false treaty gave it right to, our land and seas and shores and all these offer for the welfare and the future of our nation and more, the sovereignty inherent in the Scottish crown, the people, then they might yet save their union. Not the ugly, broken figment of a thing that now exists, but perhaps a voluntary partnership. Then they would find good neighbours, fair trading partners, and honest allies in a nation they have so long despised. They have never seen our true face or understood the blessing of a friendship in place of subjugation. Perhaps. Or perhaps, as always has been, they will learn too late the cost of dominion by deceit. For Scotland has woken to the great lie of the Union. And we will not rest, and we will not stop until there is justice for all the wrongs done us, reparation for all that has been stolen, and restoration of all that makes us not an English Scotland, but a Scotland of our own.